For my Unit 3 project, I chose an international film for topic 1. The film I watched was The Call, directed by Lee Chung-hwan. It's a Korean psychological thriller about a woman named Si-yeon who moves back into her abandoned family house. She receives a phone call from a mysterious girl named Young Suk who lived in the same house as Si-yeon, and she sounds distraught. It's then revealed Young is being held captive by her mother, who is a shaman and is being mistreated in a hidden basement, which is a torture chamber 20 years in the past. Seo and Young continue to talk on the phone and bond. They found out both of them are 28, and Seo plays Young music from her favorite band through the phone. They then realize Young is in time days before Seo's dad will die, so they come up with a plan to save him. It works, and Seo's life warps and turns into a different present with her dad alive and her whole family still living in the house. Due to Seo spending more time with her parents, she missed Young's calls and she was starting to get angry. Seo eventually answers and realizes Young is mad. Later on, Seo tries to find Young on the internet but can't find anything, so she researches the address and finds on this day Young will be murdered by her mother. Seo tells Young, and Young is able to trick her mom into stabbing her teddy bear in the bed instead of her. But Young kills her mother after her mom says, "You have death in your future." Eventually, Young Suk's angry jealousy turns into murderous intent that wreaks havoc on the timeline of present and past. Now I point out the aesthetics of the film. First is mise en scene. This movie was mainly set at real locations instead of studio sets. There were probably a few scenes where a lot had to happen, so there was a studio used. For the time warping scenes, CGI was used. The settings changed and did unrealistic things that couldn't be done on set, like the floorboard lifting away and chunks of wood floating around, or the car deteriorating. The clothes the characters wore really helped develop the film. Young, at the beginning, wore a simple white outfit to show how she was unimportant and she had no need to wear clothes that brought attention, just something to cover her body. Later, once she kills her mother and is free, she goes out and buys all types of flashy clothes, showing the difference between her being locked up and her now being able to do what she wants. Seo wore simply mainly dark-colored clothes during the original timeline, showing how she was just normal and sad. Once the time changes and her dad is back alive, her clothes turned cute, girly, and bright, showing how she was happy and she was living a good, set life in her home. Once Young kills Seo's father, her appearance goes back to the dark-colored outfits and short hair. When major things happened in her life, that's when the outfits changed as well. Overall, the lighting in the film was low and dim. It had a blue hue or a warm feeling in some scenes. The major scenes that seemed bright were the ones where Seo was hanging with her family or in that timeline. On the suspenseful scenes, you could barely see and the lighting was dark, which created an eerie feeling. Next is cinematography. This film had a lot of close-up and extreme close-up shots. This could be to better portray the characters' feelings. Usually when scenes were suspenseful or sad, the camera was focused on the faces since it better helped the audience to see their true emotions. There was one extreme close-up of Young's eyes showing Seo's mom and the policeman at the door. Wide shots were used to show where the characters were located. For example, it would show a close-up of a tombstone at a grave, then show a wide shot of Seo standing in front of the grave. The major time warping scenes were in slow motion. The first time time started to warp, things started to slowly appear and disappear, and the setting slowly turned into a new setting, with Seo looking around. The other time was when Seo was driving in the car with her father, and he started slowly dusting away, and pieces of the car, like the windows, broke and were slowly moving around. I showed this picture in an earlier slide. By these scenes being slow motion, it made them dramatic and made it easy to see all the details that were changing. Also, usually when Young was about to murder, it showed her from a low angle, mainly signifying that she had the power in the situation. Next is editing. The film's main transition from shot to shot was the cut shot transition. The scenes had good continuity. Each shot showed where the scene was taking place, what objects were the main focus during that scene, and what the person was doing. The lighting was consistent and the flow of the film was too. Nothing felt rushed or too long. The editing for the action scenes were nicely done as well. There were short takes from different angles to show all the movement happening. The accelerated cuts made the scene more exciting and nerve-wracking. The longer takes, like Young and Seo just conversing on the phone, gave a relaxed feeling. Towards the end of the movie, the parallel editing helped the audience better understand the movie. Both Seo and her mother were being chased by Young at the same time, but on the different timelines. They both were running up the stairs to get away from Young and lock themselves in the room while Young tries to get in. Editing the shot of Seo's mother fighting Young in the room, then showing the shot of Seo in the room in the present, with the blood marks on the wall appearing, was a nice detail that helped with how the timeline worked. The editing was the primary source of the audience's sense of time. Last is sound. The music helped set the tone in the different scenes. When Seo was looking around the house and basement at night, the music was eerie, which made the audience feel uneasy and scared to see what will happen next. During action scenes, the music was louder and thrilling. When Seo was talking to her sick mother, sad, mellow music was playing, making the scene feel heartwarming and touching, as well as when she saw her father again. Mainly all the scenes with Young had eerie, creepy music. Once a watcher heard that music playing, they could connect that Young was about to pop up. There was one scene where the phone ringing made a sound bridge. Seo was standing in front of the grave, and you could hear the phone ringing before the next shot was shown of Seo speeding to pick up the call in the living room. This suggests how important or anticipating this call was. Whenever the phone would ring, no background music would be playing, and it would usually be quiet, making the call more suspenseful. It would normally ring out of nowhere, which could be startling. Sudden or loud sound effects made the movie more suspenseful as well. When Seo was in the basement, it was quiet. Then you heard a sudden, loud noise coming from the pipes on the wall, causing her to gasp loudly, which could cause a watcher to do the same. Seo's tone of voice changed towards the end of the movie. In the beginning, she talked with a calm, respectful voice, but once her father was taken away from her, again, she then is disrespectful towards Young, where she starts yelling and even cussing at her, something she never did before. This change of tone in her voice shows how her feelings changed towards Young, and they were no longer on good terms. This also helped the audience realize that Young was the clear antagonist. Besides their facial expressions, the tone of a character's voice also represented their emotions. The dialogue between Young and Seo was lighthearted at the beginning, then it gradually turned confrontational and malefic toward the end. The volume of speech and music correlated well in this film. The music wasn't overpowering, and you could hear the dialogue clearly. I feel some components of this film fit under Robin Wood's horror theory. He talks about repression and how when something is not accepted and forced down, it then pops up elsewhere, as well as when he talks about displacement, where an emotion or impulse redirects from its original object to something else. Young was being held captive by her stepmother and was forced to stay alone in that house. That anger led to her killing her mother and being free, and that murderous impulse resulted in a lot of other deaths. Also, when Seo didn't answer Young's call and when Seo kept hanging up on her, that anger led to her killing Seong's parents. By this being a Korean film, there were a few differences between this film and American films. First, their culture is different from ours. When their people are buried, they have a pile above land instead of a flat grave, like the one shown in this picture. They have many small dishes when they eat and usually eat together. And shamans are pretty common in Korea too. This film was pretty similar to the classical Hollywood style, which usually has one or two goal-oriented characters and a cause and effect logic narrative with closure. This film had two characters who had goals. Young wanted to be free, then she wanted to know how the police would find out she was a killer. Seo just wanted to live her life with her family, but once that was taken away again, she wanted to figure out how to get rid of Young. One difference is Korean films mainly focus on the inner thoughts and deeper understanding of a character, and Hollywood usually relies more on the action in the film. The protagonist, Seo, wasn't necessarily shown in a positive light or negative one. The watcher could tell she was a good person, but once she got her father back and didn't talk to Young as much because she was busy with her family, she seemed kind of selfish. Some people could understand why Young got angry and felt used. Young was shown at the beginning to be in a horrible predicament and being a weak girl who someone would feel sorry for, but at the end you could tell she was the antagonist once she started murdering other characters. The story followed a cause and effect sequence, but the movie didn't have closure like Hollywood movies do. It's normal for Korean movies to end on cliffhangers or sad endings and for the audience to ponder what happens next. Like at the end, we saw that the mother disappeared again and Seo was strapped down in a chair in the basement. Overall, the components of this movie really brought it together, and some parts of the film fits under classical Hollywood, but it's different and specific to its own culture.